Hi guys, Miss Chris here from the Fountaindale Library. Today we're going to be painting watercolor flowers. Now you'll need a few things. Some paint, some brushes, and if you don't have any brushes, even a Q-tip will do. Some paper. I have watercolor paper, but any paper will do. And some water. It's spring. It's beautiful outside. We're going to paint some flowers. Okay, before we get started, it occurred to me that some of you may not have watercolor paints like these ones at home. And if you don't, that's okay, because I found a super simple recipe to make your very own watercolor paints. You only need 3 ingredients: cornstarch, food coloring, and some water. That's it. So, I'm going to show you how to make them. Oh, you do need something to put it in. So you can use some little cups. You'll need several of them. I like to use an ice cube tray. If you have one at home, that's the simplest thing. Make sure you ask your grown-up. Make sure nobody else is wanting to use it to make ice. But it makes for a nice little container. So that's what we're going to use, and that's what we're going to start with. So first, the cornstarch. You don't have to measure. It's basically about equal parts cornstarch and water. You might add a little bit more cornstarch. So we're just going to make the basic colors, because really, from your 4 basic colors, you can make almost any color. So we're just going to make 4 today, and you can make much more. You can mix them together, because of course if you mix colors, so what I've got here, let's see. We've got yellow and red and green and blue. And of course, if you mix those colors together, you can mix them a lot of different ways. Red and blue make purple. Yellow and red make orange. I know you guys are very good at mixing colors. So, now we got our cornstarch. Let's get back to making. We're going to use about the same, whoops, I put the spoon away. We're going to use about the same amount of water as cornstarch, pretty much. So about another spoon. If it's a little too sticky, you can add more water. One thing I noticed is you want to kind of mix it right away, because it will start to kind of congeal right away. So I'm going to mix these first 2 first. And I have a feeling I might need a little bit more water in the second one. So maybe I used a little more cornstarch. But that's okay. We'll just add a little bit more water. And don't worry if it's too liquidy, because as it dries, we'll just add more paint. And you can add some more cornstarch if you want it to be a little different consistency. So there's our first 2. Now let's put a little water in the second 2. And I didn't measure, because I've done this a couple times, but you can measure if you like. And actually, I didn't measure, and now I need a little bit more water. So again, if it's too watery, it's okay, because we're going to use these paints today. We're also going to save them once they dry, which I'll show you. I made one already. You can save them for the next time you're going to paint. Okay, I'm not quite done, of course, because these are all just white cornstarchy. So let's start with blue. Now, as you can see on my finger already, food coloring can be a little messy, so I didn't, but you probably should put a little bit of newspaper down. So I'm going to put a couple drops of blue, and I'm going to close it because I tend to be messy, and a couple drops of green. And really it depends. If you want a really light green, just use 1 or 2 drops. If you want a darker green, use a couple more drops. Some red, and some yellow. Okay, and then we're going to mix them. I have an extra couple mixers so we don't get them too. We'll use 1 on the dark colors. And here is your blue. That's a little hard to see. I'll hold it up when we're all done too. And there is your green. The green looks lovely. And actually, this is a little lighter than I thought it was going to be, but that's good. I like light green. Now, you can either wipe these off with a paper towel if you only have one mixer, and that'll be just fine. Or you can use a different mixer. I just wiped it off just to save some trouble. So here's the red. And that looks really nice. And since this yellow is a little lighter, I'm going to wipe it off a little bit. And our yellow. Now the yellow, it's kind of a dark yellow. If you wanted a little lighter yellow, just use a little less food coloring. Now, I'm only going to make 4 to save some time, and because I made a whole palette the other day. This is what they look like once they dry. And just like regular watercolors, very easy to reactivate. You just use a little water. So you guys can take your time and make all the colors you would like. Mix up your colors. I know those of you who come to Let's Create regularly are really good at mixing colors. So have fun with this. And next, we're going to paint our flowers. So we have our water. I have a couple. Let me put one over here. We just probably need one. Grab the other one if you need it. Some brushes. And again, if you don't have brushes, grab a Q-tip or something. You can do something like that. And we need paper. Now, one thing that is important with watercolors is you want to tape. I don't know if you can see that really well. There we go. You want to tape your paper down, just another piece of paper, usually like a cardstock. It's especially important if you don't have watercolor paper or harder paper to paint on. You can use any kind of paper. Just make sure you tape it down, so that way it's not going to get all wavy as it dries. Now, if you don't tape it down and it gets all wavy, wait till it dries, and then you can put a book on top of it or something, and that should work. But easier to tape it down, get it all set, and then you'll be ready to go. We're going to do 2 different types of painting today. We're going to do a dry canvas, and we're going to do a wet canvas. It gets 2 different results. So I know it's a little hard to see, but we'll try to zoom in, and I'll hold it up for you as well. So we can use either the paints that we made, or you can use these paints, simple colors. And first we're going to work on the dry canvas. So you're still going to wet your brush. Dry painting doesn't mean it's totally dry, but your canvas is dry. So I'm going to start with a little bit of green. You want to put some water in there and get it nice and wet. And my water's already turning green. Alright, this green we're going to use for our stems and our leaves. So we'll just start with a simple brush stroke. The more water you have, the more less intense your paint is going to be. So if you want very intense dark green, you're going to want to use a little bit more paint and a little less water. So there are some of our stems. Yeah, I used a little too much water. But that's the thing, if you get something and it's not exactly how you wanted it, you can always come back and touch it up. But there's kind of our base. Let's start with that. Now, I think I'm going to add, let's clean up our brush. I'm going to add a little brown in there for some of the stem. A little bit of water on there. I'm using kind of a big brush, but if you wanted tinier stems, you can always use a tiny brush or a Q-tip. So then, pull some stems out. Now what, I left it pretty wet, so that way I can come back through with some green. And let's take that. You want to have a paper towel too. If you get too much water on your brush, you can always take it off. And I'm going to see if I can add some green to that brown. I'm going to need a little more water. Add just a little green to give it a little more color, a little variation in the color. And maybe some really light ones behind. Gives it a little bit of depth. Okay, so that's our start. Let me hold that up so you can see. Now, maybe what we want are some flowers. You can paint any kind of flowers that you like on there. One of my favorites are the little hyacinths. They're very tiny. This kind of reminds me of them. So for a hyacinth, you might just come around with little tiny little, almost little tiny brushes. And you'll notice that as your paintbrush gets a little drier, you're going to have lighter paint, which actually kind of is nice because it gives you that variation that you would find in a real flower. So I'm just gonna do a little bit more here. I know it's hard for you guys to see this. Check it. So now maybe a little bit more purple that's a little darker. Just to add some detail. Okay. So that's just a super simple flower. Could even take a little, maybe a little brown, a little bit of my brown, and add it to the flowers. Give that a little darkness, a little bit more depth and colors. See? Not too bad. So now the next one, I'm going to use a new brush, just so you guys can see it better, is a wet canvas painting. So a wet canvas painting is you're going to wet the canvas first. So we're going to throw some water all over the canvas. And the reason, it gives a little bit, the colors are going to spread a little bit more. Now, if you take a while with your painting, you may have to add some more water. But I think we'll be okay because this is going to be a pretty simple painting. So, once you have your canvas all wet, it doesn't have to be dripping wet, but it's wet enough. And you'll see, once we get to painting, why that's good. So, in this case, I'm going to paint the flowers first because they're the ones that I really want to have the effect of the wet canvas. So I'm going to add some water to my orange and my yellow. And we're going to start with the yellow. I'm going to paint some daffodils. So, I hope you can see. So, once, let me try to hold it up a little bit. Once you put it on, it kind of spreads. It makes its own leaf. Let's see how that looks. It's so hard to see. I'll try to zoom in. And then, I'm going to kind of make the leaves around. So it's kind of that rounded look. In the middle, and it's hard to see, I know. So that's the start of it. And then we're going to just gently drop some orange in there. And it's going to kind of spread out almost like a daffodil would. And it's going to spread in to the rest of the flower, it's going to look really beautiful. You guys can see that. Now, also going to go along the edges with a little bit of orange, just to kind of define the leaves a little bit. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because nature is not perfect. Just a little bit. And it's going to draw it in too. Maybe I rinse off my brush a little bit. And I don't have as much paint on there. I can even do a little bit. I'm spreading it in a little further. Just a little bit. So what you have is really that kind of outline. And there is the top of your daffodil. Now we'll want to also give it some leaves. So maybe some more green. And now with the wet canvas, you are going to have, your leaves are going to spread out quite a bit. So one thing you can do, you can get your lighter color in there, and then come back to it, either when it dries a little bit, or just with a little more drier paint, and come back through, and maybe a little brown, give it a little more definition. You can always also do partial, so part of your canvas would be wet, which maybe is what I should have done with this. And then the other part, you could have your leaves like what we've got on our first flower. So, but it's always good to try new things. And see how the color changed when I blended the brown with the green. You get a little bit darker green. And there you go. There you have it. 2 different ways to make some beautiful spring flowers. Hope you had fun today.